What?
How many more do you still have from that? Is this from that last round of production still?
Last round we had 33,560 shirts.
Holy.
33,000?
That song from Rent.
3,560.
Oh, I was like, oh,
That's 30.
shit. Damn. Wow. I'm glad you're doing two things at once. Couldn't take an hour. Brandbeats podcast. Oh, are we live? Are we ready to go?
We are live.
So today we're talking bucket hats and
welcome back to Bucket Beats.
Their utility. I'm on vacation, but I just wanted to jump in and just talk about buckets.
Bucket. That's not what we're here for. Anyways, my name is Andrew. Anybody, go.
My name is Eric.
I got it.
My name is Lizzie.
I'm JoJo. It's just you, John.
John.
John, is this your first Brandbeats, right?
I was going for the super awkward introduction.
We all have those. It's cool.
My name is John.
Nice. John, actually, this is John's first time. He's a Brandbeats virgin, so tell us about yourself.
I am. Yeah. I'm John. I'm the executive producer in our Mountain View office, and longtime listener, first time joiner, first time caller. But yeah, excited to join you guys. What else you want to know?
Oh, I mean, nothing. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. We're happy to have you. What's our topic for today? I think we had one. I know we were talking about Eric. What did we talk about?
Yep. We are continuing our mental health conversation. Specifically, I think John mentioned mental stigmas in the workplace. So just how to keep employees happy, especially during this time when everyone's kind of on their own.
Damn. Okay. That's a big one to unpack.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy.
Mental health in the workplace. Well, let's talk a little bit about do you guys actually feel like there is a stigma about mental health? I think it's when I think about mental health, I think it's a thing they're not comfortable talking about, but I wonder if the perception is if people talk about it, is there a bias towards that? I don't necessarily, and I'll just throw it I don't necessarily feel like there is, maybe in some of our space right now, to be able to talk about it, yet I don't know that people feel comfortable to share that with other people. I'm just curious. Maybe there is.
I think it's definitely, I don't think it's people are scared to. I think it depends who you're talking about it with, right? If you're kind of talking about it amongst colleagues and stuff, I don't think there's necessarily a stigma or people don't feel comfortable to do that. But I think when you kind of bring in the work politics of, oh, I'm trying to get a promotion or I'm trying to get a raise, or I'm trying to get ahead, I do think people, it's gotten better, but, people probably they'll think twice about revealing certain things, because they feel like it might put them at a disadvantage. And I think kind of multiplies when you're talking about women or people of color.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think mental health in those communities in general, especially people of color too, it's not embraced like it is in other communities in so many ways. It's not talked about. It's not embraced culturally, and I think that falls out and becomes far more prominent in a workspace. It's also, but it is such an inherently personal topic that you almost if you're a manager of somebody, it's dangerous to bring up in some way, shape, or form. It would probably be dangerous to suggest to somebody that you think that they maybe could benefit for something like that. even if you do think that they could, which is really interesting. Go ahead, Jojo.
Your point of like suggesting, I think, especially if you talk about the the BIPOC situation, it's like if you know that someone's struggling and it's beyond your own like managerial capabilities to help this person, it's like beyond work. You know what I mean? Like when do you just like watch them deteriorate, or do you try to provide other alternative solutions? I think like especially for me or just anyone else that I kind of associate with, it's like we all go through our own mental, issues, but we push those to the side because it's like we gotta work. Who's gonna do this work? Like, my mental health is like a thing, but not really because we have deadlines. Like no one has time to take off to deal with those issues. So when do we put them above ourselves, especially when society never really made it accessible to us? Whether if it's just like therapy is fucking expensive, yoga doesn't really like do anything for me. I can't meditate, you know what I mean? So it's like, what do we offer, especially in the workplace, as far as like mental suggestions or help to kind of ease the mind of employees? Because even days off don't really do anything. Because if I have a day off, I'm still like, I got a deadline. Y'all are just fucking up what I got to do tomorrow or adding more work to like the rest of the week. I think of those things a lot, especially when it comes to the workplace period. How do we address mental stability, or how do we incorporate that instead of just saying like you're crazy, you're bitter, you're angry, you know what I mean? Like what other words can we use to try to maybe sway them in just like the direction that maybe we need to look into alternative options?
Yeah, I mean, just as a whole, mental health, I think, definitely still has a stigma, not even just in the workplace. I don't even feel comfortable talking to certain people in my personal life about mental health. It's like, and so, you have this division of like work and life are separate. And I think like our industry, the sort of creative industry, they blur those lines a lot. But I know a lot of friends who like their work is work and their home life is home life. And so then you get into this territory of like your mental health directly impacts your work life, but there's still sort of this stigma of not being able to address that and feel empowered and being vulnerable about that, especially at work. And I mean, that's a lot of factors, but I mean, even during COVID, we've all seen those horrible stories of companies not even prioritizing their employees' physical health. So it's like, how do you, if you see stories of people being forced to work during a pandemic, how can we even begin to tap into the issue of mental health when they can't even address physical health? And then I think too, like, especially during this pandemic, there's been this pressure of like, right now we're in unprecedented, uncertain times, and this is the time where we really need to show our resilience and show our clients that we can work through it. And it's like almost just adds to this idea of like you just having to muscle through something, and just not creating that space to, I don't know, really be realistic about where we're all at, because it's been a trying, for lack of a better word, trying 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, I think like, there's been like so much advancement in like healthcare and fitness and like pharmaceuticals, all that stuff, all the physical stuff, and how companies like address that with their employees. There's like, if you've got a medical issue, there's like an answer for that, and there's like a way companies deal with that. But in like today's culture, like as people who manage people, like we are so unarmed, like as a corporate culture. And I'm not talking about this company, I'm talking about just like in general, like of like America's corporate culture. We're so unarmed to talk about people about mental health issues. And that kind of does a disservice to companies, and it does a disservice definitely to like the people who are dealing with those issues. And it's something that is like it's like a catch-up point that we have to do, just in general.
I thought you brought up, or Lizzie, something that stuck out to me when you said it was like when people say they keep their like work life separate from their home life. And like, even though you might not bring your like home life into your work life most definitely affects your home life. And I think like within that thought, it's like a lot of people like have marital separations or relationship separations or don't have time to dedicate to their kids because they're all like focused on, you know, just work. And so just trying to examine like what that balance is like if you can separate your home life from your work, like how do you do the same for your home? I don't have the answer to that, but I thought that was interesting when you mentioned it.
Well, it's hard because we're at this point in our sort of culture that your work is it's intrinsically wrapped in your identity. So it's like, how do you separate it? Sometimes I find myself feeling guilty when I'm doing nothing outside of the workday. And I always just feel like I should be making and producing and just continuing. And especially now during the pandemic where like I live where I work, it's getting harder and harder to separate work and life. And therefore it's like warping my self-image and just totally fucking with my mental health. Like, I don't know if anyone else is feeling that, but I'm feeling it big time. Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like I don't care what anybody says, right? Like, I think the stigma is less about, like, no matter what, if you're bringing a little bit of your at-home stress into your workplace, like, it may not, the problem that, like, the stigma is, like, acknowledgement of that. Like, nobody wants to allow you to acknowledge, like, you came in a little bit stressed out and you had some stuff going on and that's okay. But the reality is, like, you may not address that or use it as an excuse, but you'll come in and maybe you'll be keyed up a day and you'll have a short temper, Jojo. You know, like, maybe you have a short temper or something, but like you as an individual, like you said, Lizzie, like you really cannot separate yourself. Like you are your own state of being and you are moving fluidly between personal life and work life. And there's not a real separation behind it. There's just the expectation of professionalism and the lack of acknowledgement that you are a human being outside of this place. And outside of extreme cases like a family member has passed away or something traumatic has happened in your personal life, is it even okay to bring up, like, you know, like maybe like sometimes like there are people who come out and they suffer from depression who just are going to be like, I just woke up today and I feel like shit and I don't feel like I can work. And that's not really a thing that most people would bring into work. Or feel comfortable saying, I just need a down day. In the same way somebody is comfortable saying, I woke up today with a migraine. And that sucks because they really have no control over it. And it's pretty sad that we can't understand that mental health can be just as unpredictable and as real as breaking your arm or a leg when you're going down a mountain like skiing or snowboarding. It's almost like it's just like our lack of ability to address and acknowledge that this is a reality of our lives and our lives bleed into our work. You know, it hurts us because you take it in no matter what. You just may be ignoring it. It's going to show up one way or the other. Maybe you won't be productive, or maybe you'll be an asshole or whatever. Like, it'd be so much better if you could just speak freely on it.
But does acknowledging, you know, mental issues or just that you're not working at your greatest hinder you from your promotion or from moving forward or, you know, being seen as a leader? Those are things that I think about all the time, especially being someone who voices a lot within the company. Is like, what does it look like for me to be weak? Like, I can't do that. That's always in my thought process. You know what I mean? Like, even with everything that's going on within the world, it's like, I can't be weak. Like, I have to be at my strongest because like, I need people to see me in such light. And I feel like that goes within personal and professional, like mental or mindsets.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, you're right. There's like, you can't acknowledge it because that lack, somebody may perceive that as weakness. or a lack of stability or a lack of reliability to say, hey, I'm bipolar and I'm sometimes going to not be myself. I'm aware of it. I need everybody to know it. But truly, like, that would be a healthier space to acknowledge and be able to share that without fear of it being held against you. Unfortunately, we live in a culture and this is a bigger culture problem, right? Like, than just beyond our workspace, but the vulnerability can be used against you in any way, shape, or form. Truth can be used against you. If you let a little bit of somebody a little too close, somebody can make some argument that that's a reason or a rationale why they can't trust you with this or that. I mean, that's sad.
I know there's
Oh no, go John, because I was just gonna say I just feel depressed because of it.
Yeah, no, it's for real though. I mean, I know with like a lot of like leaders that are in, maybe bigger positions, there is, that idea of what you say and what you reveal to people sometimes have a bigger impact on those people than it does on you. If as a leader of a company, you said you're bipolar, like that has big impacts on, that has like more impacts, than just kind of showing vulnerability and getting it off your chest and being honest. It is kind of like impacts on, like Andrew said, like people taking advantage of that and kind of putting other people in a bad situation because you're the leader of a company, and kind of showing that. So yeah, it's kind of like interesting, how it's always like, it's like always a double-edged sword. It's like screwed if you do, screwed if you don't. Sometimes.
I think a lot about. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go.
No, I was just saying, like, I think a lot about, especially if we're on the topic of like leaders. It's like, we do hold leaders at a certain level of like, I don't want to say like stature, but that's true. And so it's like to see someone vulnerable or hear them say the wrong things or do the wrong things. It's like, I think when we're going through something, we actually look for that in them because there's so much of like, you're doing this wrong, or like, you need to do this, you need to do that. So when you get to see their moments of weakness, I think it brings this like level of like, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have it together and you are human. And I think about it in the sense that we actually like push for it. We actually like want you to expose it in a sense that if they do, they do look bad, but we don't really help build them up. You know what I mean? We kind of kick them when they're down. It's like, so you're not all that. Like, you don't have the answers. You're not a really good leader. You're not supposed to be human, And I think they just set that back and forth. It's like, okay, well, if I have to be human, then I don't give a fuck about your feelings because I can't acknowledge mine. Just being in different work environments, I see that happen a lot where like they have so much self-aggression that they can't let out, that they just kind of absorb it with yourselves. And it's like, if I can't be this way, you can't be that way either. Yeah.
So a couple questions for me then. I think first is, how can companies, how can companies, I guess, make people feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. And two, how can companies promote overall happiness or just make people happy at the workplace? Because you think about like very superficial things, and John, I'm sure you could probably speak to this, being like in proximity to tech town and whatnot, but like, ping pong tables and like beanbag chairs, which are very like, just surface level things to keep people happy. But I guess like, how can we truly make sure that people are happy beyond just these like surface things, I suppose?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like you're talking about like, there are symbolic gestures of like, we're here to take care of you so you can be comfortable, versus like an atmosphere or culture that truly embraces it. And I would say like
100%.
This subject is kind of like near and dear to me because I've been, as a person like at our company, I've been in and out of therapy since I was 12, with like anxiety. And I think like the one thing that I came to like maybe 2 or 3 years ago was just like, I always want to be really open with the fact that I have things that I work on. That doesn't mean that I'm like a weak person. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean anything, but there are things that are beneficial from creating a ritual or a practice. I was having a conversation today with somebody, and I was just saying, like, I think of therapy as like meditation. It's a practice in saying, like, I'm going to stop. I'm going to dedicate time to reflecting on my own mental well-being, to reflecting on my own habits, to try and understand myself a little bit better, what my motivations are. And those are good things ultimately, because like the better and aware I am of myself, the better and more authority I have over my own habits, to like have the right to choose, like, oh, I tend to do this thing in this situation. There's probably a good side to that, and there's probably a really bad side to it too. But you have to like spend the time and the energy to go through those things. I mean, like, suffice it to say, like, I put it out there because I try and like, I don't want there to be a stigma around like mental health or going to therapy. Or I think the stigma for me to like right now that bothers me most is that it's like addressing your mental health is a privilege. And so like, it's not super accessible. And I wish more people made it more accessible. There is steps happening in that way, but the things that we can do if you're in a position of power or leadership, to John's point, is like disarm yourself a little bit, talk about it, like be open with it, and don't allow it to make it seem like a weakness. Like, I've done that the last 2 years. I've gone every other week, if not every week, at times where I felt like I needed it. And less so because I felt like I was at risk or I had a problem or something's wrong with me, and more so because I just felt like maybe there's some stuff that I need to put some energy into myself around beyond my professional career all the time. And so it's more about like creating an atmosphere where it feels safe to talk about things like that. And that in such a way that people, your employees, you know, it was actually really empowering for me. Like, when one of the first times, like, one of my direct reports like shared with me that they were in therapy, I was like, oh man, that's amazing. Because I have best friends my whole life who have just like never even like heard me talk about it, but like would never even open their mind to the thought that they needed to go there, because people have that stigma. So like from our standpoint of like, lead by taking off some of your armor in some way and saying like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, address that. You are going to go through time, have issues. You may suffer from anxiety or depression, and that's not your fault. And that doesn't make you weaker. If anything, I think those things make you stronger, because you find a way to kind of navigate through life despite those things.
What do you do when you come across someone that you manage that doesn't have like, or who isn't there yet? You know, like, did you know they need help? They need a shoulder to lean on. Like, what do you suggest, or how do you like guide through those conversations? Because a lot of times, me personally, again, coming from a spectrum, like, I have to be this like person with armor. How do you break that ice for someone, you know, as a manager, so they can feel comfortable to even like come to you?
I mean, I think the way that I've approached it is I offer first. Like, it's about like setting an example of like, if I can be vulnerable and share that with you, I'm almost setting the groundwork to saying like, look, you don't have to, but I'll do it on my end to show you that that's an okay thing to do. It's all about setting an example, because it's very dangerous to be overly aggressive with that, because somebody, like you said, they may not be ready to hear that. There may been times in my life too where I felt like somebody could benefit from that, and it never even meant at all that I thought anything was wrong with them. I'm just like, I think, you know, maybe like spending some time and energy doing some work on yourself would be really helpful to you. But I've also felt the pressure that like this dynamic between a manager and an employee is like, I'm not safe. That's not a safe thing for me to say, or an okay thing for me to say to somebody. What I've done in the past where I'm like, I want that message to be clear to somebody, is I've maybe talked to our HR department to, hey, there's maybe an opportunity to reiterate that we offer these things. We offer support and programs and things that are going on, so that it doesn't feel so personal or accusatory, or just that let's try and find a safe way to remind this person that there's at least some programs come with employment here that are available to you that might help you out. But it is, like you said, it's really hard as a manager, and to see that in somebody, to see maybe somebody who might just maybe would want to even dip their toe in it. And like, if it was my friend on one-to-one, I could easily have that conversation. But it's like there's a stigma behind making that sort of a suggestion to somebody who you work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like if part of the reason why people feel hesitant to bring up mental health in the workplace is because work and personal life are separate, then it's problematic when a manager is like encouraging someone to seek therapy, which, like, full disclosure, I love therapy. Everyone needs a therapist, and I know there's like a lot of privilege in saying that because it is super inaccessible for so many people, but like, I don't think you need any sort of diagnosis or any sort of thing, quote unquote, wrong with you to go to therapy, because it's just, how can you not benefit from just talking to someone who's like professionally trained in listening and helping you process things? So like, I don't necessarily think it's like a company or a manager's place to encourage or aid someone in their mental health process. But I do think that like there is, and this kind of goes to that anecdote that you touched on, Andrew, of like this idea of leading by example. You spoke to how when one of your direct reports disclosed to you that they go to therapy, and that made such an impact to you to hear that, and like that sort of shifted your perspective on probably them and how you interact with them and how you carry yourself at work. And so it's kind of just like leading by example, not necessarily telling people what to do, but more so carrying yourself in a way that you are unashamed of it. And that's hard, easier said than done, right? Like, it's hard to be vulnerable, especially at work. But yeah, I think it's like less about companies making people happy and more so companies making people feel heard and supported in however they want to go about personal issues.
Totally.
What about providing resources? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you guys both spoke about, like, I know a lot of companies right now are offering discounts for like exercising, you know, subscriptions or like therapy, you know, like, what do you guys feel about that as an alternative?
Resources, I think that's like, I wish every company like would turn to understand or look at the value at the end of the day. When you have a healthy, let's make it a business case, right? Like, it is valuable to support your employees' mental fucking health. Spend the money, because when you get people who are coming in who are more balanced, I promise you, you'll have a more productive person, right? That's the business case. At the end of the day, though, like, the right thing to do is to provide resources and mechanisms for people to seek that help, and to remove sort of like the historical barriers and stigmas around it. I think by speaking openly about it, and that's why I think it's really important, like, to, if you have this, just talk about them, because I think a lot of times, like, you have resources like that at your company, and like most people, it doesn't really cross their mind because they don't think they need it. It's not a thing that like crosses most people's mind, so they just don't even know that they have access to it.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, even, you know, stop talking, like talking about mental health as if it was a problem to fix is also a kind of cultural, like, if you could switch that way of talking about it, then it kind of changes everyone's perception about it, right? Because, you know, if you talk about it as just like, you know, something that you look after, just like your body, you know, your fitness or whatever, you know, it becomes a proactive thing that everyone does as a norm versus, you know, this thing that is, you know, that you're trying to fix that's wrong with you. Yeah.
That's so true. I mean, look, the language around it is better, right? Like even the fact that you're calling it mental health, right? Like most people used to call it a psychologist back in the day or therapy.
Right.
That's like saying going to the gym is muscle therapy. Like that is not what it is. Like you're trying to live a healthy lifestyle, and part of that is considering your health. And like I always like to talk about it, like the way I suggest it to people is put energy into yourself. You know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, we're talking about creating like some sort of like mental harmony on it, but it's like we all go. I mean, many of us go to the gym, right? Like people are coming around, they spend time. You put time and energy into going to work every day, into your career, into advancing your career. But like it takes very little effort, but to spend an hour every month, even just thinking about yourself and your habits and your tendencies. It's just like it was awesome to see a big movement in people doing meditation, because I don't actually see I think meditation is mental health. Like that is it. It's all the same. It's just like going to somebody and talking to them. It's just a different flavor of getting at the same thing. It's about slowing yourself down, being a little bit more aware. They're all kind of getting at the same thing. I think therapy, if you go to a therapist or you talk to a mental health professional of any sort, I think talking to a friend for an hour and a half can be a form of mental health and therapy. It's about putting energy into yourself. And like we at work in the world we live in put 40, 50, 60, 70 hours in a week. And then we scoff at spending some money or just time focusing on like what's going on with us and like why do we do things, or reflection in general. Like you can journal. There's so many ways to get at it that don't have to be I need to spend $200 an hour to go do this.
I think that's the issue. And I brought it up in the previous one too, where it's just like I don't have the money to go to a therapist. And even when I did, and there were times where like she wasn't hitting on the things that I needed to hit her on, I'm like, oh, I'm wasting money. Like I'm giving out my money, and like there's anxiety behind all of that if you can't afford it. So it's like, what other steps can you take? And if we're talking about in the workplace, it's like, what other steps can we provide individuals who can afford to see a therapist, who needs that mental stimulation, who needs to be understood? Like, what could we do as managers, colleagues, executives to bring in a better just overall lifestyle to kind of maybe alleviate some of that stress that's on individuals' shoulders? And I know like when we are together, it's a little bit more easier because we had like Fridays, we had movie nights, we had these other social events that just felt good. But in the times where we're like locked into our own house and like all we're doing is working on projects, and like we feel the stress and the pressure of the world, the society, but also timelines, deadlines, and like trying to get to the next level. Like what can we do as a group of individuals to kind of maybe uplift and like bring each other together so we don't feel left out, that we can like focus on like our health and like build on these like connection and conversations. So honestly, for me, my mental health is more so just like I feel like I'm stressed out, or I'm left out, or I'm siloed, or I'm alone. Like I feel like the connections that we had in the office or with each other actually helped me out a lot. Like we don't have that anymore. I think that's an enlightenment of everyone's issue is like, what do we do when we don't have each other?
Who has good answers?
I wish
Give me the answer so I can incorporate it.
I fucking wish therapy was free. Like, come on, right? That would solve a lot of issues. Number one, but since we live in a world where it's not, if companies have the means, I've heard of a lot of companies having like on staff a therapist for like people don't even have to commit, or maybe they get like a referral or just go to that therapist in a pinch when they're feeling totally overwhelmed. Just having someone who's not your manager, not HR, not your best friend at work, or like the person you kind of eat lunch with, like someone who's trained, who's a professional, who will keep it confidential, but also is like an outlet. Another thing I know companies do is like how a lot of companies have designated PTO and designated sick days, having designated mental health days, like feeling like it is okay for me to actually take this day to do whatever I need to do to feel centered and to sort of debrief and process. I think like sometimes well, maybe it'll change after this pandemic, but I think like a lot of times when we were sick, it was just easy to be like, I'm just gonna power through it, mind over matter, and I think a lot of shifts will occur because of this pandemic and the idea of like if you're sick, go home and take care of yourself. And I would love to see that same sort of logic applied surrounding mental health. Because I mean, it's like a hindrance. It's a block, and you should feel empowered to take that time and process and work through that, just like you would an injury or sickness.
I think we're probably like, and COVID probably like accelerated this, but we're probably not that far away from a world where companies like, like we live in an information economy and like our assets are our brains, right? And we're probably not that far from a world where companies are investing in or requiring people to like get mental health checkups, for lack of a better, like however we end up branding that. I was reading something, I can't remember what country it was, but it was in Europe, where there was like there's this one university that has like a really intense MBA program, and they actually required people to see a therapist. They called it something else, but basically like keep people from like breaking. They required people to just have that mental health check-in. And I think if it, just culturally, I think it's something we're not too far away from.
I can't stress enough though throughout like this conversation that finding the right therapist is also crucial, because I've wasted a lot of time. So like having a designated therapist like through our job and whatever, like that sounds cool and all, but like I've been in therapy where I'm just like, you're making me more mad. Like you're treating me like I feel like I'd rather be talking to a wall. So it's like also like finding someone that's affordable, because obviously sometimes the ones that you need are a little bit out of your network or a lot more like expensive. It's a lot of things that go into the factor of seeking someone to help you, which I feel like is a reason why we don't typically do it, or we'll like go to one person and be like, you're not it, I don't need therapy, I need something else. Those are things that are important to acknowledge too.
Absolutely. I think that's like a huge part of it, is that the journey of even just taking that first step to get help. It's one thing to recognize that you maybe need to talk to someone. It's another thing to find that right someone. And like that is a part of this whole process that I feel like isn't really talked about a lot. It's just kind of like the hardest part is admitting you need help, and then just go get the help and you'll be fine. And it's like, no, you're not like cured when you go to a therapist. Like this is a lifelong thing for a lot of people. Like this is something they will continue to struggle and combat. And so it's like important to note that not only is it inaccessible, but like if you even do have the means to go to therapy, it's an uphill battle. It's like a really long, tricky, hard process. Yeah.
There is no end zone, 100% in my opinion. And like Jojo, I'm glad you bring it up, because I think it's important to set expectations for people, because you more than likely will meet somebody that doesn't work for you, and you got to be able and willing to try a few things to go like, okay, like it's going to take me a little while to get somebody I'm comfortable with. But it's also important. I mean, and this is at least for me, like I think of therapy like a practice, in the same way that if you stop working out, your body's going to deteriorate. And if you stop taking time to reflect and be aware of your habits and your tendencies, and maybe the reasons or the motivations behind them, like you will fall back into the same patterns without thinking about why you're doing this or that. And I've always thought of it as like it's an infinite game. You know, it's not there's no I get to this and I solved it and I'm done now. Because even if you figure it out, if you stop practicing like reflecting on it, you'll just get out of the practice of like being aware of it and you just do the habit. So that's why it is like the costliness of it. You're right. Like, unfortunately, we live in a world, but I do think that there's a lot out there these days, and like I also think like, look, the mental health like wellness like industry is problematic as it is right now because it's super opportunistic and predatory. Like, you know, there's a bunch of people selling snake oil out there, and you know, you just got to be careful. And I think like at the end of the day, it's like put it in your own hands. Like find what works for you. Like for some people, they may not need to go talk to somebody. For some people, they may want to like journal every day, and maybe that's enough for you to like. That's enough for you to have a habit of reflecting and thinking about things for you to at least have any sort of realization like that is a win. You know, I used to do this. There was this website called 750 Words, and all you would do is every single day you would write 750 words free write. Stream of consciousness. You type it up, and it would like scan your words and analyze, and it would show you like, hey, you're kind of feeling like introverted, or it was like $5 a month. It was a cool website, and $5 a month. It's still up, I'm sure, but you just free write, and it says like, oh, you're feeling a little bit introverted, or you're feeling confident today, or this, and it's just interesting to stop and think about what your state is at the moment. So I think that there's a lot of things at our disposal. They don't all have to be costly to have an impact is all. You know, I think that do what feels right for you, and don't be afraid to like try some things, and like just because they didn't work doesn't mean that something else won't.
It's a little deviant, but since we're talking about like mental health, like what do you guys feel about the thought of like safety in a workplace? Like where does that lie in any of this? Because we talk about therapists and things like that, and honestly, to be honest, probably therapy would be a huge chunk of like we spend 70-40 hours together with your coworkers, managers, employees. Like what can we do, again, like going back to the workplace, like to make people feel safe at work? What does that look and feel like?
I mean, I don't want to keep talking, but like psychological safety is like paramount to inclusiveness in the workplace, right? Like people absolutely have to feel safe to be wrong, safe to put their ideas out there, safe to share their perspective, and safe to like, you know, confident and secure in their job that despite them being willing to do and say whatever is on their mind, that nothing's at risk. That, you know, I think like in the creative industry, like I think in some ways we have a luxury, right? Because I always think about it this way, like when you're paid to come up with ideas or be creative, like you're paid to be wrong 95% of the time. And like very, very few ideas that you come up with, like you're usually coming up with hundreds and hundreds of them to come up with any one problem, and they're all shit except for one, and maybe that one works in the field of like everybody else. And so like we are just in a space of bad ideas and good ideas. You know, it's like it's an idea space, right? Like the best idea wins. But I think when you take that to a corporate world, or you talk about like finances and things like that, where it's not encouraged to be different, it's not encouraged to bring something new to the table, because new isn't safe. New is weird and untested and scary. Whereas new is good for us. But I would encourage people, you know, again, it's like psychological safety is not only important for people to feel that mental health and that mental stability, but it's important for you to do something different and new. And it's incredibly valuable, like when you have that in a workspace. And valuable because one, new ideas are valuable, but two, let's again go back to a business case. Like attrition, bad. Like you don't want to lose people because they don't feel like they can bring something or offer something at the table. And that costs company money. It's not good. Like it's worth it to invest and change, like beyond the morality of it. Like we all like care and don't want to lose the people around us, but it's like, that's not good for business. It's bad for business. Like it's worth it to invest in making sure that that's not the atmosphere that you're creating. Because I think I personally believe like people by nature, they're problem solvers, they're social by nature. Not everybody, but many of us, like as an animal, like they want to be collaborative. They want to contribute. The hierarchy of needs says like, we want to feel important. And if you don't have safety to contribute mentally from an idea standpoint, like you never have the opportunity to feel important.
Eric, I would like to hear from you because also like you come from a very like, you're quiet, like how do you find safety as someone who's like a highly introverted person?
I find safety. That's a great question. I mean, obviously, I feel safe, like, when I have my alone time, I guess, because I can like be just one with my thoughts. But I don't know. I guess it's different because now we're forced to be alone. So to me, it's almost like it's excessive. Like I need to be around people now. It's like it was cool for the first month, but now I'm like, okay, I'm going a little nuts over here. So I don't know. I'd say pre-COVID, my safety, like my sanctuary, was just kind of being one of my thoughts when I could just have time to think and like ideate or whatever as a copywriter. But now, I don't know. I think safety just means something totally different in the age of COVID. I don't know what it is, but I feel like the definition is warped a little bit. But to bring it back to what Andrew and John were saying, being that like mental wellness is such an investment on the part of business and such a commodity, like our minds are commodities, right? Not even just in the creative business, but like as people in like a white collar industry, like we're not doing manual labor, right? So I just wonder why mental wellness isn't more widespread and more like encouraged, I suppose. And I don't know if anyone has any answers, but something I've been pondering about.
Capitalism.
There you go.
Like just
Yeah.
we're all cogs in the machine and we're all supposed to just pump out money, and when we're not, we're like not contributing to society. I mean, I don't know, like there's this kind of this question I keep having that I've had for a while, but it's like, should companies even have any say in my mental health? Like, is that a business's place? Like I think there's a difference between making an environment inclusive and having your employees and your coworkers and your colleagues feel heard, feel valued, and that comes across in a lot of different ways. And I think that directly correlates to mental health is like a tricky, an employee's like level of satisfaction at work, which is like a large part of their life. So maybe mental health, but like, are you providing equal opportunities? Are you checking in with your employees regularly? Are you giving them resources to, if they're struggling with certain areas, like, are you giving them those resources to and the tools to solve problems? Yeah, I don't know, like how do you feel safe with your mental health? I think it really just comes down to inclusivity. If I feel appreciated and included, and I feel like I can be myself, then the rest will follow. If I feel like I work at a place that really likes me for me and values me for me, then I will be more inclined to be honest and vulnerable about issues, mental health or otherwise, that I'm having.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Maybe when I said like encouraged, like mental health, that wasn't like a good way to put it, but I think definitely creating like an environment for that inclusion and space for that inclusion, and not just like if a manager said to me, "Yo, go to therapy," like that would just feel really fucking weird. So I think it is just, yeah, how do you foster an environment that, I don't know, that feels safe for everyone? Going back to what Jojo was saying.
I think like, you know, when I think about my managers or just even being in agency, a creative agency, like it's this comfortability that we have with each other that most companies don't have. And it's not saying that like my boss is my friend, because they can be, but they don't have to be. You know what I mean? But like, how do you create this safe environment for us, knowing that you're not my friend, you know, knowing that this is strictly a place of work, that I'm still able to come to you with like problems or needing sanctuary or needing to know that you're not going to just defend the business, but you're going to have my back. That's kind of what I was talking about, where it's like, I am fortunate enough to say that like the people I work with, I have felt comfortable coming to them with my own personal issues, but I know in a lot of places or just environments in general that people don't. You know, how do you keep that like professional balance, but still be like, hey, like I need you to understand where I'm coming from a mental space.
It's hard because like a lot of the ways that we're sort of taught to progress in our industry are not very friendly to being open with mental health. Kind of, you have to network and be the it person and talk a big game and be one of the team and grab drinks, and it's like it's hard to do that if you're struggling, or if you're shy, or if you don't drink, or if like there's certain, like it's hard to navigate the sort of politics of office culture, when you're already like struggling to navigate things in your personal life, or like, so it's maybe like reviewing or auditing or sort of restructuring this idea of like professionalism and how one advances in their career or at work, and sort of taking into consideration that not everyone's path, career or otherwise, is going to look the same as it has, however it has been in our industry.
Totally. And if I could tie that to a comment from Dallas that I personally resonated with, she said, "I feel safe when people hold space for us introverts to have our thoughts heard or asked directly, especially in meetings or face-to-face collaborative settings." And what I think that goes back to is really just as managers or whatever, as a colleague, even just, I guess, taking initiative, being more proactive about making your colleagues feel comfortable, which I think is super important, especially as Dallas is saying, as like, her and I are introverts. But we also have a question from someone named Lindsay Rolden, and she says, "Now working remotely, it's as if we've become more accessible at work for longer periods of time. What have each of you done to set boundaries to safeguard your personal time and your mental health?" Jojo?
What are boundaries? No, I'm just kidding.
Boundaries? I don't know if I said, to be honest, like I'm not a boundaries type person because I break boundaries. I don't believe in that. I should, but I don't. So when it comes to my own personal boundaries, I think that for me, it's like I will always find peace within knowing that I spoke my piece. And if I have to get something off my chest, whether it's received or not, like at the end of the day, I feel like I sleep better. And and for me, it is having those harder conversations and standing up for what I know that's right, but also just being humble and knowing that sometimes I'm not right. Like I think I take a different like lens on what personal health is, because it's like a lot of times, or just being who I am, I'm not used to being wrong. And so when I am wrong, like that is more of like a strike to my own ego, which makes me feel worse than just being depressed. So I actually prefer to have conversations. I actually prefer the challenge, just so I can continue to grow. And I say this a lot on these brain beats where I say like I'm built for this, where I'm just like I feel like I'm built to continue to have conversations, and I'm not one to keep on, certain matters.
Anyone else?
I mean, I fucking moved because I like okay, real talk. Like when I got used to going into my office, and now that I'm like going into the office, and I'm a big person like on zoning. Like I want my home space to be like my home space. I like a place where I relax to be where my brain is not about work. And it was hard for me. Like it was really hard because like I felt like work invaded my relaxation space. And I was like, I need a different dynamic. I moved out of the city, like in the part of the city that I lived in, to a new part of town to get a place that would work for me, where I could have a place that I could be like, that's where I'll focus, that's where I'll work. And then I can have some space where now that's like a place of privilege, but I do think like things you can do that are really subtle or like set boundaries for yourself, but also like remind other people to respect those boundaries. Like we have people who work all over this nation and frankly around the globe. Set office hours for yourself on your fucking Google Calendar. Set office hours. And if people aren't respecting those, like something else I've seen somebody in our team do that I love was they just put on their calendar, all they put was a block every day. And they said, hey, please ask before booking here. And I'm like, that's amazing, because they're not saying I can't accommodate. They're saying, please think twice about the fact that you're scheduling a meeting for me after a certain time. It would be reasonable for us to have a conversation on whether or not it really needs to happen today or could it happen tomorrow. And something as simple as that is really effective in you setting boundaries, not only for yourself, but setting boundaries for other people to also just have pause for a second and think about the fact that like, people fire off meetings flippantly, but like we have to remember like we're living in a really weird world. We're working in a really across time zones, and we should all just be considerate of each other in like the fray of it all.
Yeah, it's hard. What are we like month 4, 5 of
6.
On 6, we're talking about 6.
Oh my god! Thank God it's Monday. I did not. Why didn't you tell me that Monday? No, I mean like you touched on this idea of zoning, and I am missing that so much. There's these sort of natural breaks in your day that happen during when you have a sort of regular routine that I just don't have anymore. I don't have anything that's really like kicking me into action and really forcing me to experience things that I usually would. And I'm finding that like without those sort of conversations in passing in the kitchen while I'm filling up my coffee, or having that sort of natural, okay, it's like 6:30, I'm gonna drive home now, and have like that moment to decompress, and then like I have this sort of separation, like I'm finding that it's all just blurring together. And like my weekends sometimes look the same as my weeks, and I am just finding that, oh, I don't really have anything like dragging me out of here, so I'm just gonna keep going. Like I have like it's so easy to get caught up, and so I mean I really have not been great about it, and I'm trying now recently to be more intentional about carving out time for myself. It's like sort of a learned practice after however long of just schedule set for me that I didn't necessarily choose to sort of use a schedule. It's hard, but I think like it's really important in sort of maintaining my sanity, at least. I don't know if it's like I'm sure some people love the lack of structure, but I certainly do not.
Yeah.
But like, it's just like sort of, it's like speaks back to like that sort of idea of like self-reflection. Like, what have I been feeling? Uh, why? Like, what changes in my life have maybe contributed to me feeling that way? And like figuring out those things will help sort of carve a path forward of how you can sort of take care of yourself. But it's hard to be on top of it, especially when you're already in a sort of weird mental space, to like muster up that energy to then like continue to exert energy to then debrief. I don't. It's a vicious cycle, but
Yeah. To piggyback off of that real quick, and again, as an introvert, when I heard that we were going to be on quarantine, like for a little bit, I mean, originally it's supposed to be like what, like 2 weeks, a month. Now it's coming on 6 months. But anyway, that first month for me, when we're just kind of going through it, I was like, yo, I have more like time at home, more alone time. Like I thought it was going to be great. And then now it just feels like I'm at home, but I don't feel as comfortable as I did before quarantine, if that makes sense. Because I think I do need that separation and that structure. And now that, and it's probably because I have a studio apartment, so it's all kind of one space. But um, I just feel like there's really like no separation between my like work life and home life because it's all kind of blurred together. But Sean, I'm curious to hear your take about this too. Like, how have you been setting boundaries up there?
Yeah, like my experience has been a little like pretty interesting. So right before COVID hit, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law were visiting, and then they're from New York, and they got stuck here. Like they weren't going to go back to New York, and they actually stayed with us, me and my wife, for the first 4 months of
What?
COVID. Yeah.
living a dream.
So
No boundaries.
yeah, like it's been wild. It's been a wild ride. So basically the first month of COVID, like I was like probably mentally breaking every single day and just like rebuilding myself up the next morning. And I think, what, and this, I've heard this story from many people too on how they've kind of like coped with it. Like you just, and I'm very much like, I'm a producer, so I'm like very much like a structured kind of person. Like you kind of have to build, I just built that structure into my life. I like started just like waking up ass crack early and like doing yoga and like meditating like way more and like forcing myself to like block out I would block out so many like chunks of time in my day. I mean, it's like a good thing for us to do anyway, but like I was like being like super disciplined about it, and I've kind of like laxed on a lot of that stuff lately. Like I'm not waking up as early now. But it was like one of those things that I literally just like had to do. Else there was like no way I was gonna make it through that time period. Luckily like like I think they're love my in-laws and all that, but like they're great, but it's a lot to like share your space like that, and we were it was a pretty intense time, especially with like everything that was going on in New York and like all the kind of worries from that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, like, I can kind of relate. I had moved as well as like Andrew during COVID, and like, I was this whole thing because I was living kind of, it was a 1 bedroom, but it was as small as a studio, and I have a daughter. I was like, oh, we're gonna like during this COVID, if we're gonna be locked in the house together, we're just gonna get like a bigger space. So I got like a townhouse, 2 bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, like perfect. And what did I do? I just made more space for my boyfriend and his daughter to move in. And I'm like,
yeah.
nothing is big enough. It's not big enough. Nothing works. Like,
Yeah.
The 2 levels is great. She'll be up there playing herself on work, but it's like now there's more people in the house. And any other time than COVID, like I'm sure it would have been fine, but it's just we are here, and like it's a lot. And to your point, I don't have a schedule because I suck at consistency. So it's like, what do? You just adapt to like the norm, and the norm is like your life was chaotic during COVID. But like not knowing the end date, I think is like just makes things a little bit more like anxious or a little bit more like anxiety ridden. Because I'm like, I don't said everything I need to say. I don't yelled at everything I needed to yell about. Like, so what else do we have left? Um, you just here, still stuck in the same place. I didn't watch Bird Box, but I have a feeling this is something like Bird Box.
He's honestly so timely now. Bird Box
Oh, I
and the
know.
other one with God, the other monster movie that was the same premise, but like all that shit is like super relevant.
Yeah, like okay, today's Friday. Cool. Like,
Right.
Might as well be Tuesday during Corona.
what?
We're all the same.
It's all the same. Yeah, it's
All the
wild.
same.
Think Erwin?
What?
Yeah.
What do you
Nothing
think?
wrong.
Erwin? You just left.
You just didn't even say a word.
You don't say. You don't.
Oh, I'm speechless.
My dad joke.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has. You have
Question?
I gotta go.
Oh,
Of course. There
okay,
it
we're
is.
getting to that time.
I've been holding it.
That was pretty much it. No other questions in the comments, but do y'all have any other things you want to bring up before JoJo has her bathroom break?
I mean, yeah. Go. Who's gonna say it? Who's gonna speak?
I think it's
I
all
was
you.
gonna say that the only thing that I would offer to people is just like, if you are, I think it's really important for people to say like having dealt with like all levels of mental health, not just like with myself, with people close to me, like it's okay to have dialogue and conversation around it. Especially like even with your peers at work, like make other people feel comfortable about it by not making there be a stigma around the conversation, so long as you feel that way. I do think it's like really important for people to remember that like that's a thing that's out there, because so many people suffer from stuff and don't attempt to work at it because of the stigma that we just like all the stigmas we've talked about. Like, do something. Like, it doesn't have to be a super expensive therapist or psychologist. You don't need to get on pills or whatever. You could, like, I think John talked about it. He's like, he spent time meditating every day. Like, that is somebody putting some energy into themselves and finding a way to like try and do something for their own mental health and mental well-being. Like something as small as that. You can journal. There's free options out there. I mean, exercise. There are very simple things you can do that can have a pretty wild effect on your mental health, that you should just remember that. That at the end of the day, it's about just like putting energy into it and thinking about it, and that doesn't make you like a weak or negative person or anything against you.
I love that idea, and like just to build off of that, it's like providing resources that are free. And I know everything costs, but there's so many free resources, and it's like it doesn't have to be directed towards a person. But if you have like a Slack, or if you have email or whatever, it's literally just sharing content that may have inspired you, because even though you think it might be useless, it might help someone else out. So just keeping that dialogue, and also just like Andrew said, providing your own personal vulnerability will allow other people to be vulnerable to you. Someone who needs you and you don't realize that they need you can just, gravitate towards you, or maybe are sparked by your own braveness. So literally, like, I just, at the end of the day, I think it all starts with us and like our own self-awareness and acknowledgement. And the way that we exude it will definitely continue to help and grow like our community, whether it's with work or friends, loved ones, parents, whatever.
I think also just like doing your part to like normalize when dealing with people who may, come out to you that they have, they're dealing with some issues, like kind of normalizing the situation. I think it's, if you don't treat it like it's something that you have to walk on eggshells around people for, and that you don't, treat people differently necessarily, because as soon as people start feeling like you view them a certain way, then you lose that trust. You lose that, you lose that feeling of safety. Even if you are kind of like on the surface, trying to offer help, it actually, loses that normalization of mental health. I think that's also important if someone comes up to you with an issue that they have.
All right, well,
Love it.
I gotta go pee.
Good time.
Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Bye.
All right, take care, guys.